We are the RASopathies Network, and we work to connect, collaborate, and accelerate in knowledge of the RASopathies so that we can find effective therapeutic interventions that increase our family's quality of life. Our mission is to advance research to improve the quality of life for RASopathies families by bringing together families, clinicians, and scientists. And so this is one of those efforts. Next slide, please. So this is our board of directors. I'm the president. Beth Stronach
here too.
is our secretary, our brain. Our treasurer is Bruce Steckman, parent of a child with Costello syndrome. I am a parent of a child with Costello syndrome, Beth with a child with Noonan syndrome. Lee Johnson is my husband, and Cara Borian is the parent of a child with CFC syndrome. We are looking for volunteers. So anybody, please, if you're not interested, spread the word to your family members, friends, knock on our door. We're here. The door is open. Okay. So now navigating our website. In order to look for anything about, to get to the webinars, actually, so this will be recorded within and posted within 2 weeks. If you go to the RASopathies button, that's the first one on the top menu, horizontal menu, it'll show you another menu that says syndromes and meetings and resources. So click on the resources one, and then in that page is webinars. And so that's where you'll find it. In terms of research, if you click on the research button, you will find a submenu that includes the word studies. And if you click on that, there will be a list of studies that we have collected. We're always looking for more information. So if you have information for us to add to any of these menu items, we are open to your sharing them. The easiest way is to send information to info@rasopathiesnet.org. Info. Okay, next slide. So our campaigns right now, we fundraise specifically for the $1 million bike ride, where we will match donations up to $10,000 and then take that amount that we've received and our $10,000 and give it over to the $1 million bike ride, where they match it up to $20,000. So donations to us for the $1 million bike ride can be worth 4 times more to the grant winner. So that's, well, there'll be more, we'll cover that more in the next slide. I mean, in the future slides. We also help with research studies and surveys. We do have a contact registry where we collect information about the individual, the first caregiver, second caregiver, and a person who knows if any of the information, contact information changes. And this follows the Framingham research study that's been so long running because of that contact person. We're working with Gina's team with the NIH Natural History Study, which is really, really exciting because it's going to be a safe, solid place to collect information and have information shared. And then there's an feeding survey right now, and Beth will continue to share more about that. We hold our biennial symposia, they're international, and we're working on our 8th one, which will be in July 2023. In collaboration, how did I say this before? At the same time, overlapping with the Costello Syndrome Family Network's family conference. So that's really exciting to give researchers and families a chance to get to know each other in a non-formal way. Then we also work on awareness, the webinars like this one, social media channels, website resources, meeting attendance, networking with other rare diseases and family organizations. So trying to keep our fingers where we can, although we only have 10, so that's why we need volunteers. Okay, Beth, take it away.
All right, thanks, Lisa. You probably, I don't know if you can see me. My name is Beth Stronach. I'm the secretary, and I'm just going to run through these slides pretty quickly. So one of our major fundraising efforts is the $1 million bike ride, where we essentially have people ride for RASopathies or donate your time or some money in order to fund a research grant. You can see over the last number of years, we've been able to fund projects from researchers, both nationally and internationally. We try to host the people that have received money so that they can either give a webinar or speak at our symposia. And so you may end up hearing from some of these people. And Gregor was one Gregor Andelfinger spoke at our last symposia. So this is what we're trying to raise money for. And hopefully you'll be able to see the value of the funds be played out through research projects that will come back and benefit the community. This is just an infographic from Orphan Disease Center at Penn. They put on the $1 Million Bike Ride, and it's really an absolutely tremendous resource. And there are a lot of different, they have actually 29 different rare disease teams. So RASopathies is only one group, but people are raising money for their own communities. And last year we were able to raise over $75,000 thanks to our community riders, and then our being able to have our funds supported and matched by the Penn Orphan Disease Center. So it's really an amazing opportunity, and we hope you can participate. This was our recipient, our awardee last year, Dr. Fabrice Jaffray. He's at Weill Cornell Medical College, and he's a cell and developmental biologist by training. He worked in Maria Contreras' lab, and he has a really interesting project that is designed to discover new therapies for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in RASopathies using human-induced pluripotent stem cells. That's what iPSC stands for, and doing basically high throughput drug screening. And so hopefully we can showcase him in the future and he can tell us about his work. The next bike ride is actually coming up in June on the 11th. And ways that you could participate is to actually ride your own bike in Philadelphia, where in person or virtually, meaning anywhere that you live, you can ride your bike. You can set up your own fundraiser, or you can recruit people to help raise funds for yourself that you provide to the MDBR bike ride, or you can ride for our team, RASopathies team riders. You can volunteer at the water stop. You can donate to support the research grant. More information and registration can be found at themilliondollarbikeride.org, and you can follow and use the hashtag PennMedMDBR 2022. We also wanted to just remind everybody that our next symposium is going to be in the summer of 2023. We have 3 excellent academic chairs, Gregor Andelfinger, Anton Bennett, and Rini Pierpont, representing both clinical and research sides, and with a wealth of different research expertise and clinical expertise. So we're really excited. We're in the planning phases of this right now. So more about that in the future. One study that has been posted on some of the Facebook groups, I don't know if this is Noonan syndrome specific. I think it could be Noonan syndrome spectrum disorders. So NSLAH, NSML, but it basically has to do with feeding, and it's just a survey out of the Netherlands. So if you are a parent of an NS child or someone that actually has NS, whether or not you've experienced feeding problems or eating problems, basically it's a large kind of spreadsheet that you can fill out how your child has been eating, and sort of rate that on a scale. And from the information that you provide, they're going to, tally up all that data and aggregate it, and hopefully see what kinds of problems people are having, and during what ages and things like that. So sorry, that's going to close in the next day or two. So if you can, We will have this posted on the website. You've probably seen it on the Facebook pages, but here's the link for that. And Dagmar Tiemens is the contact person as well. Tamar Green has been running a study out at Stanford for a while now, doing brain neuroimaging for some of the RASopathies, and she is able to bring people out to Stanford to do the imaging and a comprehensive evaluation. So we've got that information posted on our website as well. Lisa Scheuer mentioned the contact registry, so I won't dwell on that again, but if you are interested in having your contact information on our list, you can let us know at info@rasopathies.net. Sorry, rasopathieSnet.org. And now we'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gina Ney and have her tell us about this natural history study. And I will stop sharing my screen and let her share hers.
All right, thank you so much. I want to welcome everyone. Can you hear and see my presentation? Can you hear me and see the slides? Yeah?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and the RASopathies Network for being such a great partner for us here at NCI. So I'm going to talk about the study, obviously, for children and adults with RASopathies. And I am Gina Ney, as I've been introduced. I'm a physician at the NIH, but I'm presenting on behalf of our larger RASopathies group at the NIH, who are all listed here on this first page. And I think it's really important, before we get into the details of who can enroll in our study, how we at the NIH, and particularly at NCI, which is the National Cancer Institute, are approaching RAS. Okay, so this is really important. It'll help everyone, I guess, put into context why we're doing this study, because you might be sitting in the audience wondering, why is the NCI, the National Cancer Institute, doing a study on RASopathies, right? That's a very reasonable question. So I hope to answer that for you. So as everyone on this call, I'm sure, understands, that the RASopathies are a spectrum of syndromes that have similar clinical presentations or medical conditions. So it can be heart disease, it can be seizures, growth deficiency. But the thing they have in common, for sure, is that they all activate RAS signaling, because they all have mutations in a RAS pathway gene. And RAS signaling is really critical for normal development. So you can imagine when that process is dysregulated, when it's imbalanced, that you can develop medical conditions from that, from early childhood, from before, during a mother's pregnancy even. So we also are trying to understand, and this is well described in Costello syndrome, are these individuals at increased risk for cancer? And what we know at the National Cancer Institute, and a lot of, worldwide we understand this, is that RAS is important in both pediatric cancer and adult cancer and genetic disorders like RASopathies. So in RASopathies, as I mentioned, from when a child is, conceived, who's going to have RASopathy, they are expressing this dysregulated RAS signaling in all their tissues. In cancer, we know this is really important, and that RAS mutations occur frequently, but it only occurs in one particular tissue. It doesn't occur everywhere in the body. But we tried to marry these ideas at the National Cancer Institute to say, can we learn something about the genetic disorders of RASopathies to help cancer, or can we learn something from what we know about cancer to help treatment with RASopathies, right? So that seems like a logical sort of question to ask yourself. We also know that in RASopathies, there are very significant unmet medical needs. So this is at the National Cancer Institute is the perfect place to study these rare diseases where we have obvious unmet medical needs. And these unmet medical needs can be life-threatening, including cancer and very significant heart disease and poor growth and neurocognitive issues. We also know that these are very rare diseases. So it's really hard to design a clinical trial that's going to intervene somehow in these illnesses. There's no really standardized medical care. It's kind of doctors talking to other experts and other doctors in the field, right? When you see a patient in your clinic. And that limits the expertise to a few places. But what we want to do is develop a way that everyone, regardless of where you are in the world, gets the same type of treatment. We also don't know how often these mutations occur. So we know that when patients come to clinic who have symptoms of RASopathy, they might get tested for a genetic change and be diagnosed with a RASopathy, but there may also be people walking around with other RAS mutations and they don't even know it. So we're also trying to understand that and develop all these ideas to improve our clinical care of patients with RASopathies. So to address this, at the NIH, we take this multi-pronged approach to understand how cancer and these genetic disorders can inform each other and help us better treat these illnesses. So we need to understand, the first part of what we do is we have to understand how RAS works in cells and animals in the lab. So that helps us understand, can we intervene with a drug? What if we just watch the mice over time, what happens to them, right? So we're watching all of this in the laboratory, and you can test a lot more that way, right? We also have to characterize what are the diseases associated with RASopathies, and can we intervene somehow? And that requires us to have a natural history study and develop clinical trials. And then the third part, as I mentioned, is to better define and understand how often these mutations may be occurring in the general population. That takes a population genomics approach. So you can think of us working on several different things. This is our overarching goal at the NIH, is to understand all these very different but very similar aspects of RAS and RASopathies. So as you might guess, this takes a tremendous amount of collaboration and a team approach, including some faces you may notice in this picture, like Lisa. And Beth, I think you're in here too. I saw you. Yep. Okay. And Bruce Gell, who's a cardiologist, and we have geneticists and oncologists and from across the world. This was in 2019 at our kickoff meeting. And now we're so proud to say we actually have, we're really progressing in all these areas based on what came out of this collaborative team approach. And we're here to study the genetic causes and medical conditions of RASopathies and rare diseases and how these affect children. So as I mentioned, we do three main things. This is sort of the written words of what we're trying to do in our overall goal. So we look in the lab, we're having animal and cell models to define the RAS biology. We test drugs in these cells in the mice to identify preclinical opportunities for a clinical trial in people. We evaluate new drugs that target this pathway to determine, may they work? Will they synergize with something else? We also, as I'm going to talk about, developed a RASopathy natural history study. This helps us understand RASopathies and their health conditions. We hope to quantify cancer risk and other disease risk for these individuals and better understand how we may be able to treat some of these illnesses in the future with new agents. And also, we want to understand the genetic causes of RASopathies using the population genomics approach, but also our natural history study, so we can quantify all of this, all these risks and how often these things occur in the general population. So now to give you an overview of the natural history study. So you might be asking, well, what is a natural history study? And really what this is a way to allow us at the NIH to follow a group of individuals with a disease or group of diseases over time to understand their medical conditions. This includes a range of looking at lots of data. Okay, so this is going to include laboratory data, imaging, physical exams. We analyze all of this data, and this is data that is collected over many years by an individual's physician, and we take all of this in and look at it and analyze it to determine what happens in RASopathies or what happens in, your disease or group of diseases. This does not include any treatment. Okay, so whatever treatment the individuals are getting, they continue to get. We're not changing anything about the treatment for the natural history study. So think of this as a big data collection, as I mentioned, to better understand these medical conditions. So we say this is an imaging report, and this is your lab report, and this is a doctor's clinic note, how things, or your genetic testing result. And we take all of this again and we analyze it, and we want to create clinical care guidelines by looking at all this data, describe the genetic causes of RASopathies, and identify opportunities for future interventional trials. So it's a huge data collection. That's just kind of that's how I think the easiest way to sort of think about what we're doing. So who can enroll? Anyone with a diagnosis of RASopathy listed here, okay? So this can include newly recognized RASopathies. It can also include individuals who have had genetic testing that detected a change in the RAS-MAP kinase pathway, but have not been formally diagnosed by a physician or a provider with a RASopathy. Family members of individuals with RASopathies can also enroll. The only exclusion criteria right now is if an individual has NF1 and not and only NF1. We're excluding them right now because of other natural history studies ongoing. But if they have NF1 plus another RAS-MAP kinase pathway gene mutation, those patients can enroll in the study. Additional considerations are, you do not have to have been diagnosed with cancer in the past. That's not a prerequisite to enroll in the study. The participant can be deceased. There is no age limit to participate. The only thing I want to mention here is the NIH Clinical Center does like to evaluate, in most cases, participants over the age of 3. So that's the only potential limitation to age, but there's no age limit to participate upfront in the study. And they must be able to read and write in English without the use of a translator, simply because our consenting document and questionnaire processes are all currently only in English. The medical records, however, can be in another language, and we will have those translated to English, and the participant can live anywhere. There's no geographic restriction. So how to enroll? We offer an entirely online enrollment process. So you go to service.cancer.gov/myras. It'll ask you to register. You'll provide your email and a password to log in. Your first step is to complete an eligibility questionnaire. And then it usually takes us 1 to 2 weeks to review that, but it could take up to 4 weeks once the questionnaire is completed to determine eligibility. You can email me at any time if there's any issues, or also Renee Bremer at nih.gov if you have problems enrolling or logging into our system. So participation in the study, so everyone completes the online enrollment from home and completes the questionnaires from home. Okay, we ask that of everyone. And then a subset of people are invited to the clinical center for additional evaluations. We follow participants for an extended period of time, and you can drop out at any time. You can enroll now and drop out 2 years from now. You can wait, and like I said, and new patients can enroll anytime throughout the study. So you can wait and enroll a year from now. There's no sort of time limitations. There's no restrictions on when you can drop out or when you have to enroll by. These studies tend to be very long, and we follow patients and collect data from them as long as our data analysis continues to be contributing in a positive way to what our goals are, right? Which are helping individuals with RASopathies. So these can last many, 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 many years. So for everyone in the study, you do online questionnaires that includes questions about medical conditions, allergies, surgeries, biopsies. They answer questions about family members. So did if you enroll your son, did your daughter also have a RASopathy, or do you have a RASopathy, or do you have other conditions? You answer questions about sleep, feelings, everyday activities, and how easily those are completed. There's a sample collection, which typically includes blood work and saliva. And we ask participants to sign a medical release form. So we contact your doctors, we collect imaging studies, lab work, clinic notes, genetic test results, surgery records, biopsy records, anything like that. So that's really what that's for. And that's part of our bigger picture data collection analysis part. For those who are invited to the clinical center, there's additional imaging studies that we do there. There's a visit and examination by one of our RASopathy team members, and then additional evaluations by consultants as needed. So we tailor that visit really to the individual. And just to sort of highlight where we are right now. So our study opened in July of 2021. So far, we've screened 48 total participants. You can see the breakdown of their diagnosis shown in this graph. So about as expected, about half are Noonan syndrome. A very impressive 27% is Costello syndrome, and cardiofacial cutaneous syndrome at 13%. We have one individual with Noonan syndrome with multiple lentiginous, and then other for 8%. So you can see how it's breaking down, and the RASopathies so far included. And our clinical center evaluations, because of COVID, have not started yet. We hope to begin these in the late spring, early summer, but all of this is a work in progress and always pending COVID to make sure that we can get people here safely. That's the key, right? We certainly are not going to do any harm and place anyone in danger to bring them here to the clinical center for the study. So it's always pending COVID. So looking to the future, our future enrollment. So as I mentioned, we follow participants for extended period of time. This could mean several years, many years. Typically, that includes an annual follow-up questionnaire that's completed online, where you update major sort of medical changes. Our goal is to enroll at least 500 participants. Again, no requirement for cancer history, no treatment exclusion criteria. We will continue to enroll the same spectrum of RASopathies. We've been enrolling CFC, Costello, Noonan, whatever it is, we're continuing to enroll those same individuals. And so it brings us back to what is our overall mission in our sort of advancing RASopathy therapy project, our umbrella project, right? Which is our approach to RAS at the NCI. And the first is to accelerate a comprehensive clinical, genetic, and molecular understanding of RASopathies. And what we contribute with the natural history study is that clinical part, right? We want to understand RASopathies from a clinical standpoint. What are the medical conditions associated with RASopathies? How often do these occur? What genetic mutations are associated with what types of clinical diagnoses? We hope to take the information that we're going to receive during the RASopathy natural history study and analyze that to develop effective therapies and prevention strategies for the health problems associated with RASopathies and tumors with RAS mutations. And that's really our goal. And then once we have that, once we get to that point, we start over again. We go back to the beginning and say, what did we miss? Can we do better? What did we learn and we need to study in the lab again? What do we need? Maybe a new gene we have to look at from our genetic work. So really this is a kind of a circular process where we're learning a lot about RASopathies and RAS mutations, and we just keep going until there's nothing more to learn. So you can imagine how long this is going to happen, right? How long it's going to occur. So I want to thank everyone again for their time. I hope to left enough time to answer questions. And if something happens and we don't get a question answered, you think of something later, here's my contact information. Feel free to email me at any time. This is directly me, so you'll directly get me if you email me at that address. And I try to get back to people as soon as I can. So with that, I'll pause. And if anyone has questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Gina. I'm sorry to everybody that I don't know if there was a glitch. That was me, but I'm glad you were able to continue. Does anyone want to offer up any questions through the chat? Or you can unmute yourself. Okay, here we go. What's the reasoning for being over 3 years old?
That's a great question. So the NIH Clinical Center is not a pediatric specific hospital. So because of that, it just operates a little bit differently than another pediatric hospital that you might be thinking of. So really it's that. Now we are working to try and change that, but it's probably going to be over several years. But it's really, it's strictly based on equipment and how equipment used typically for the weight of a child under the age of 3 is compared to older children.
Here's another one that came in. How can we check on where we are in the process if we have already completed the initial sign up?
So by the initial sign up, do they mean the eligibility questionnaire, or do they mean we've already gone through the consent process? So and I'll answer for both so they don't have to sort of ask the question. So if you've completed the eligibility questionnaire as your first initial step, as I mentioned, it usually takes our study team about 1 to 2 weeks to review those answers. And then once someone is eligible, you will receive an email from me indicating that you're eligible. If they're talking about the consenting process, that is, and they've been through the eligibility questionnaire and they're eligible, we've had our consent call. The next step is 2 additional questionnaires that are getting released a little slower than we would like. But basically, this is an entirely new enrollment process online. So it is, as questionnaires get released, we want to make sure that it's working correctly. So that process is a little bit slower, but you should be getting, anyone who's consented to be in the study already, you should be getting your questionnaires soon. And by soon, I would guess in the next week or 2. And as I mentioned, it's strictly a technical thing to make sure we're not having problems with our new online system.
And if they're not eligible, you'll also give that information at the same.
That's right. Yeah. So they'll hear from us either way, whether they're eligible or ineligible. That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
And have you had any people express any concerns about the, filling out the forms or anything? Has there been any back end or, data glitches, any problems with collecting the information so far?
No, so there have not been any issues with collecting the information. So when someone submits their answers, they have all been recorded. One technical glitch that has occurred is that in the portal online, it'll say they haven't completed something yet, even though they had already done the questionnaire. So people in those cases have just emailed me and I say, oh, no, I see your data. Okay. It's just a matter of that data getting sort of transferred in the cloud as it is, but we've recorded all of the submitted answers. Yeah, so fortunately we haven't had an issue where someone thought they had submitted answers, we didn't receive them, and then they had to go back in and do it. But it doesn't always go, that icon in the portal doesn't always go away and say completed, even though it had been. Yeah.
Okay. Here's another great question that I would like to know the answer to also. Is there an opportunity to incorporate other existing registries or databases to speed up the collection for a larger cohort?
That we have not talked about yet. I think some of it would need to depend on what data was collected in the other registry. I think that's the biggest thing, and figure out if there's a way to speed that up at all. We do have a very extensive list of things that we're looking at in our study. So we would certainly, I think we would be open to it, but we haven't explored that yet since we've only been open for, 6 or 7 months. Yeah.
I can jump in and also comment. For those who I have not met, Douglas Stewart, I'm the principal investigator of this study, and Dr. Ney is the lead principal investigator. This study is like many other natural history studies our branch has done over the past couple of decades. And one of the hallmark features of those studies is collaboration with groups such as RASopathies.net. We've done this with the Fanconi anemia group and various bone marrow failure groups. I've worked on DICER1, and we have worked with these groups closely in forums such as this to promote the study in an ethical way, and encourage recruitment, again, in an ethical way, and also share results. And so I think a lot of the power of these types of collaborations comes from webinars and meetings such as this, where we are given an opportunity to describe the study, and families, if they're interested, are invited to join. Hopefully not under any feeling of pressure or coercion. But the question is a great one. It does take a long time to put together these cohorts, and any ideas in which where we can speed up the process are welcome. So
do you think, Dr. Stewart, would so if a family had already joined a registry through their own, say, family support group, or their individual syndrome network, would that would you advise them to re-enroll in your natural history study, or would information that they've contributed be able to be used or transferred?
Yeah, it's a great question. For a lot of the so let me back up for a second. My experience, families often join multiple studies. And because often studies are looking at different questions. The ability to share information across studies is often can be limited by IRB, ethics and regulatory reasons. And so that's one issue. The other issue is that since studies are looking at different questions, often, in fact, I think always, the data that's collected can be quite different. There can be a little overlap, but it's hard to exchange the data in a way that's maybe convenient for the families, unfortunately. So we recognize that having folks sign up for multiple studies is a burden. There's no doubt about that. But I think it yields useful information that can be of use to a variety of different investigators.
Okay, great.
And I think, another reason that there's so much challenge to it is to protect the family in the process. And so that this, all these locking doors that are required to be safer.
Yep. I'll let you go back to the questions. Yep.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so from the audience, another question is, will the families that are part of the study receive info on medications or treatments that are found during this study?
Yes, so we will be sending, so we plan to do at least yearly updates for everyone who participates in the study. Certainly, if we found something that we thought would be beneficial to anyone, as soon as we found that, we would obviously want to share that information, even if it was off sort of some time frame or integral where we were going to share information. And certainly anytime, so in addition to the annual information that we share about the study, certainly major updates if we did find something throughout the course of the study. And then of course, major results or publications or things like that, we would make sure we're sharing with participants, not just related to drugs or therapies or something like that. As I mentioned, we're not going to be intervening in any way, right? We're just studying this. But certainly we would be happy to share, say if the NIH or other institutions were opening a RASopathy interventional trial, we'd be happy, and we're aware of it, we'd be happy to share the information with everyone as well. So really it's sort of, we plan to have, related to the study, regular communications with study participants about where we are in the study, any really critical things that we are finding, and then share the outcomes and the results of the study, of course, with our participants. That's a critical piece of what we're doing as well.
Thank you. There's one more. For the animal and cell models, is the NCI looking at screening repurposed drugs in addition to the potential for new drugs?
So I think we are exploring a wide range of things. I think it's almost even too much to discuss in even the last 10 minutes or even an hour seminar. It's almost like you need 1 hour to address perhaps all the utilities of RAS targeting, a single RAS targeting agent, right? So I think that, is there a potential to use repurposed drugs and test those? I think that's certainly a reasonable thing that I'm sure we are looking at that. We're also looking at all of the sort of expected compounds or drugs that people are probably thinking of, like Mech inhibitors or HRAS inhibitors and those things. So all of that is sort of ongoing work. Yes.
I actually have another question. I'm sorry if I missed this again. I was out for a minute. Did you speak to what I don't want to say total enrollment because it may be open-ended, but I saw that you had about a little bit under 50 maybe enrollees. Do you have an amount that you're striving to get, that you will know that you have robust enough data?
Our goal is 500.
500. Okay.
Our goal is 500. But of course, again, if we keep, as long as we are contributing the data in a positive way, obviously, I don't think we'll necessarily stop at 500 as long as we continue to learn things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And Beth, I think you missed out on the slides that showed the makeup right now, 48, and how it broke up into the different.
Yeah. Okay. And how can people promote? How can we and how can other people promote the study? Through what avenues do you think would really help?
So it's been a really, as I've talked to study participants, I would say a lot of them, we had a great response to the RASopathies Network Symposium in July. Good. And then, but really since then, it's been families who have enrolled and have really, feel like this is important information and they can contribute, there's something for them to contribute. And they've told me it's through Facebook support groups, disease-specific support groups, obviously are really fantastic. And really, and the disease-specific networks too. I mean, they've really been, I think our participants have been a really great voice for encouraging other families and to enroll in the study. So that's been, I think, really outstanding.
Awesome. Another question came in. So this person says, when getting accepted into the study, would someone with a complex RASopathy, say with JMML or another MPD, myeloproliferative disorder history, have a stronger chance of being included? Do you look back at the early history?
So we are not, so anyone with a RASopathy can enroll. We've had only one limitation based on sort of like language, as I mentioned, the needing to be able to talk, communicate well and read all the questionnaires are all in English and they are very extensive. We would not exclude anyone, with a RASopathy and a history of JMML. Everyone, we like to treat everyone equally, basically. So it's not, I don't think there's a concern about that at all. So I try to reassure everyone that we try to treat everyone the same.
Yeah, I could just follow up on that. We have fairly broad enrollment or eligibility criteria, which is someone with a clinical diagnosis of a RASopathy or has a variant in a gene known to be associated with RASopathies. The exception being people with NF1 are not part of this study, but there are other studies for people with NF1. And we put everyone, if you will, into the sort of the field cohort. And that's as Dr. Ney mentioned, collection of questionnaires and medical records and so forth. And our goal is to try to be to invite as many people as possible to the NIH Clinical Center. In non-COVID times, I think that would have started quite a while ago, but there have been obviously restrictions on our ability to do that. But we're working to start the first invites in the next few months, probably for more local individuals. The other thing I'd just like to say is for these studies do not cost anybody anything. Your insurance is not billed. There's no contact with insurance, and we work very hard to protect privacy. The other thing is, as I said, we like to be as inclusive as we can for the invites to the clinical center in Bethesda. It's not a requirement. You can sort of stay in the field cohort the entire study if you want. You don't have to come. We realize it's a lot of time and effort and work to travel really anywhere, especially with young children, especially those with medical issues. But if it does work out and can come, those travel costs are paid for. There are a few exceptions, a few small things we can't pay for, like parking at your host airport, that kind of thing. But I would say close to 100% of the costs are covered. Meals, hotels, flights, transportation from the airport in the Washington area to the clinical center, and so forth. So we try to make it as easy as possible to come if we can make it work for you.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I had a question, and it's a reframe of another question, so I hope I meet this for the person who asked it. In terms of Mech Inhibitors, maybe if a person has does have a tumor right now in process of being treated, do you think there's a way to try to help the oncology team with respect to something like a Mech inhibitor? Or is that sort of off the table because they're in their oncological trial?
So that is, it's a great question. One that I think is still unanswered, certainly in the scientific field, where it is. I think the other, so one is, it's a great question, but, and we can debate among ourselves, even at NCI, what people would do. And I think certainly starting another therapy during oncology treatment would also depend if that patient were on another study or another trial. Some trials in oncology would exclude particular additional therapies from being added. So you would hate to sort of in any way, in any way sort of compromise, that. But certainly we could, talk about that among ourselves. What if pending the person was not on a clinical trial and there weren't exclusion criteria for other drugs such as Mech inhibitors to be used, we could certainly talk about that. But I don't think we have a consensus right now.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to ask another question about, so presumably we hope that the natural history study will be able to yield data that can inform, the phased clinical trials. Do you think that those clinical trials would take place through the NIH, through your group, or are you interested in having companies sponsor clinical trials with new drugs, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we are open for the interventional trials. We're open to a lot of different options, at this point. Obviously, at the NIH Clinical Center, we have a lot of resources, and there are advantages for us seeing at least some of the people on that interventional trial at the clinical center. Would we have to be the only enrolling site? Absolutely not. Sometimes there can be other institutions that are enrolling individuals. In particular, if another institution starts the trial and then they say, hey, NIH, would you also like to see those participants? So we're open to that. We have certainly partnered with companies in the past to conduct other interventional trials. So we really are open to whatever. I think the bottom line is whatever makes sense for patient care, is our goal, right? So as long as we are all on the same team and all have the same goal to improve the care of patients, then we will try and sort of proceed in that way, with what makes sense for them. So that's how we approach things. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Doug, did you want to add anything else?
No, well, very well said. We're fortunate that our collaborators on this project include a number of oncologists pediatric oncologists who have a lot of experience in drug development. I'm thinking of Dr. Brigitte Wiedemann and Dr. Andrea Gross, who are both known in the community for really leading the charge on getting the first FDA-approved therapies for plexiform neurofibroma growth and neurofibromatosis type 1. So we've known them for many years, and they have a lot of history working with groups such as this one, as well as the FDA, as well as industry. Again, it's a collaborative approach. Within the NIH, there's also a lot of experience with rare disease development, even rarer than NF1 or the RASopathies we're talking about. One of the things I'm thinking of is Proteus syndrome, which is literally 1 in a million. I learned the other day of an even rare disorder, something called Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, which is 1 in 8 million children, or 1 in 8 million people. So that's really extremely rare, and yet there's an effort here to work with industry and other academic labs to develop therapies for that. So broad spectrum of experience, lots of people to call upon, and to make it a success.
Excellent. I think maybe this will be our last question, since it's about 5 o'clock. From the audience, is there a timeline for getting a trial started for the Mech inhibitors for the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? Anybody know? You guys know about that? Anything about any trials starting?
So I am not aware of anything that is imminent for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and Mech inhibitors. I know I came from the University of Michigan before I was at NCI, and I can tell you that the pediatric cardiologist there who took care of patients with RASopathies and had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. They have a sort of a standard operating procedure now in place there to use Mech inhibitors. So I know that this is something that is of a lot of interest, but imminently I am not aware of anything that for that, but it certainly is of a lot of interest to people.
Yeah, I'll just mention that I'm at the Critical Path Institute. We have a grant with FDA, also work very closely with NCATS. And with FDA, they're very interested in real world data, turning real world data and real world evidence and utilizing that data to be able to generate additional hypotheses that could advance clinical trials. And this is one of the area that they're really interested in exploring a little bit further. And the purpose here is that we're wanting to actively engage with physicians who treat these patients, in off-labeled circumstances, so that we can learn and potentially generate a clinical trial that may be able to answer the questions that we're wanting to answer.
Good news. Thank you. I mean, I think from what we hear in the community anecdotally, and from people in our network, it's definitely something that a lot of clinicians and interested parties are discussing. I don't know that the time frame is clear yet, but hopefully in the very near future.
In the near future, exactly. So we're trying to engage as many individuals who have that data to be able to submit it to the FDA so that they can actually then collate it and do an analysis and see, how much data is there and what the data actually show, so that that can be utilized for either a supplement to a clinical trial or for advancing clinical trials in general.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Well, I think we've come to the end of our hour, and I really want to thank Gina Ney and also Doug Stewart for coming and presenting this to us today. I think it was really very, very helpful to see sort of the background and the overall picture of why you guys are doing this study and how people can get involved. And I hope that for our attendees, that you can take this back to your networks and families and friends and other people and hopefully share the good news and the resources and get people to participate. So if there are no other comments or questions, on behalf of RASopathies Network, thanks for joining us, and we will see you in our social channels. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting this.
You're welcome.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.